Hey everyone, welcome to Uncovering the Litanies. I'm your host Luke Evans.
And I'm your co-host, Nick Del Lorenzo.
Today we're here with Walter Plummer, who is the Director of Children and Youth Evangelization at St. Gertrude. So Walter, last time we interviewed you, you were the Director of Evangelization. Now you're the Director of Children and Youth Evangelization.
Demoted. No, I'm just
That's right. It was like a sideways, kind of like diagonally downwards is the direction I moved.
Yeah. Just kidding. What do you do now? What's the difference between what your positions were?
Less.
Okay. So you were demoted after all.
Yeah, kind of actually. Yeah. So when we were looking at kind of responsibilities. One of my coworkers was doing a lot of things that were not directly related to the things that I was doing. So we kind of just renegotiated some stuff and put responsibilities in different places, which makes things a little bit more manageable.
Yeah.
So that's been good.
Do you have more rest time now? Just do
I don't know
stuff?
if it's more rest time. I think I can just do the work that I need to do a little bit better.
Okay.
Because I have more time in which to do it.
That's cool. So like Director of Youth Evangelization, do you get to spend more time with trying to evangelize the kids and at the parish, or
a lot
more direct work with the people?
So one of the things that did shift is I am now responsible for the family faith ministry that we do here at the parish. So that's for kids who are in grades 4 through 6 and their parents. And we bring everyone together on Sunday mornings. Last year, one of my coworkers was doing that, but with the kind of shift of responsibilities, Tyler picked up some of the big picture stuff that I was doing, and I dropped some of those things so that I could focus more on things like family faith, which is kind of nice. I like teaching. I like being with groups of people. It's a lot of fun.
Right. And then cool. before you were the Director of Children and Youth Evangelization, were you less involved with the kids and youth?
Yeah, a little bit less involved. I only had one program, confirmation preparation, that I was directly kind of facilitating. And then I was a little bit more hands-off for everything else, which was workable. But I don't know. I like being with kids. I like being with families. It's kind of fun.
Kids are fun.
That's cool. Sort of like Pope JP too. You get to be a little bit more like him, right?
Yeah. Like in what ways? How do you mean?
Well, I just remember that he did a lot of work with I guess he did work with young couples. Did he do it with? I don't know.
Teens? I don't know. The boundary lines between high school and young adult in that time or that place was probably a little bit slipperier, a little bit less well defined. So he probably did some youth ministry, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure. I don't know. Let's hope, or else I just made a fool of myself. But how has have you always evangelization and talking with people been part of your life, or has that been more recent, and how has that influenced who you are?
Yeah, good questions. So this probably gets into my some of my just sort of my relationship with Jesus. But I wanted to be an English teacher. So I think that was always at least since middle school. I like to read, I like to write, I want to be an English teacher. I had some powerful experiences just of the love of the Lord when I was in high school. So I always loved working with young people. I always loved mentoring and coaching. I have a couple younger siblings. I just like doing that stuff, helping people, mentoring. When I got into college, I realized that I did not like classroom teaching. And it could have been just that I could probably teach religion at this point. I could teach theology maybe, but I was spending so much time teaching grammar and reading stuff that we couldn't really talk about the things that I really wanted to talk about. So throughout college, I began to realize more and more that the things that are really close to my heart, near and dear to my heart, are listening to people, helping them to uncover what God is doing in their lives, helping them to get unstuck from things that they're stuck in or feel like they're stuck in. And a lot of that comes back to knowing who God is and knowing who he says we are. So that's kind of where my, it's not just a lot of where it comes from. That's the heart of where it comes from. The heart of living a good life is to know who he is and to know who we are. So a lot of my journey in the work of evangelization, doing evangelization, just stemmed from those encounters, and then trying to find ways that I could spend more and more time helping people connect better with the Lord, to know Him better, and to live more deeply as His sons and daughters.
Right.
It's funny. I take like those personality tests periodically, like the Myers-Briggs or things like that, and I come out like 49-51 extrovert introvert, which is really interesting. I find like the temperaments to be a helpful one. In the temperaments, I'm strong choleric, which means that I am extroverted but principle centered. When you use that kind of tool to think about how people think and work. So I like being with people, but only when we're talking about stuff that matters.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
I find small talk harder than like talking about stuff like this.
Yeah.
This is like life-giving to me.
Yeah.
Teaching, having good discussions, getting down to like the meat of something, or whatever it is. That stuff is really important to me. But I think like being able to listen and to talk with people and to really receive people and to like ask them how they're doing, and that I think has been something that the Lord has helped me to grow in.
Yeah.
Those are probably more, maybe since like college, late high school, college, the Lord's done a lot of work in my life to do that. So
Yeah.
I'm in my mid-30s, so that's like a long time ago at this point.
Yeah. So what is an example of something like a conversation that wouldn't really matter as much as like,
So when I was working, I served at another parish previous to being at Good Shepherd. And when I served there, there was this great guy who I became good friends with. He was part of our leadership teams. But the first time I met him, he and I were just like standing there during this parish event and just like talking about life. And it's just so much work to just keep asking more and more questions and more questions.
Was the other
Just
guy
about,
like not really talking?
Yeah, he's not a super talkative guy.
Oh, okay.
He's like really good guy. But like he was kind of giving one word answers or one sentence answers for things. So I'm really like digging and like trying to get responses for things, trying to find that like, usually when you're talking with someone, there's like a touch point.
Yeah.
And you can find something that really opens up the conversation. And we just had to really work to get there. And that was just hard because you're just like thinking about as many different parts of his life that I could ask about reasonably as possible.
Yeah, it kind of feels like one of those awkward moments. It's like, it'd be weird just to like, how do I get out of conversation? But also,
it's exactly.
It's kind of rude that
maybe this is why I'm still in like youth ministry, because I refuse to give up on those conversations. This
right?
Is like my innate stubbornness. I'm like, I'm not giving up until we have connected in some way.
Right. I totally get what you're saying. It's definite. I totally understand what you're saying when you're talking about the small talk thing, because I'm like I think I've been better at it recently because I have like really close friends now, and I'm able to we have these like poppy conversations where you're just not really talking about anything, but you're really just talking. Yeah. But I just love having like deep conversations about something that matters to me, and a lot of them I actually really just love debating with people and having arguments. Usually, like it's become less like angry with me recently, and I used to just want to be like, just get into something about super controversial. But now I just love like talking about something that we disagree on, but it's like a really minute theological difference or something like that, and just really talking and having a really like positively energetic conversation. Yeah,
and that's a good skill to develop too, because it's like it is always a helpful thing to remember. Persons and principles are different things, right? Yeah. Persons are always good. Yeah. Principles are not. Some principles are not good principles to operate on, but even poorly held, even poor principles are usually coming from some kind of interesting place or a place that's worth understanding more about.
Yeah. I definitely don't like having conversations where there's real world consequences. Like if one of us wins an argument or one person is proved more right, then the other person has to radically or even minutely change his behavior.
That's hard,
because a person who has to do that is really unwilling to lose, and is real and usually they'll bring up some emotional argument or something like that. I like talking about like differences, like how did you interpret this passage of this book, and then it's like nobody's right, and even if I really think I'm right and I win the argument, quote unquote, that's not really like there's not like, dang, I have to read this book a different way, something like that.
Yeah, it is fun. Yeah, it's fun to have those kind of conversations. They're always good.
Yep. So do we want to start getting into the humility?
Because I need all the humility I can get.
Right. So is that from, like, how does that relate with Thomistic, St. Dominic? Was that written by a Dominican or?
Yes, it was written by Father Martin Hagen.
Okay.
And somebody sent it to me, I think, or somebody shared it with me at some point, probably because they knew I needed it. But there's an interesting article. So I found it on the Dominicana Journal. If you just go on Google and search Thomistic Litany of Humility, it's one of the first posts that pop up.
Okay.
And there's an interesting blurb at the beginning. Did you guys get a chance to read the blurb at all? It's okay if you didn't.
No, I don't
go through
think
it.
so.
No.
So there's a blurb at the beginning of the litany. And he explains why he went and wrote this. And he had some other friars who helped him, but he has this funny bit about the friars not being known for their own humility. And I think it's because in the heritage of St. Dominic and St. Thomas and all the good scholars, there's a love for making distinctions, right? So last time we got together, we talked about the Litany of Humility. Had some great questions about well, wait a minute, can you really not desire to be loved? Can you really not desire any kind of praise? Can you, is that really a good thing that you should even want? Yeah. Those are good distinctions to make. And so if you read that Litany of Humility without some good context, I think it can come off making life sound like you can never have any joy or fun or praise if you want to be holy. Yeah. So I think what Father Martin Hagen wrote about in that kind of preface to the prayer, he wanted to go through and using the richness of St. Thomas Aquinas's kind of teaching about humility, the virtue of humility, and different aspects of it. He wanted to dig into what that meant and to make some finer distinctions. There's a phrase I like. I think it's from Joseph Pieper, but maybe it's someone else. We distinguish in order to unite. Ooh, it might be somebody else. Probably somebody else. Y'all out there can fact check me after this.
Yep.
Distinguish in order to unite, right? So by understanding more deeply how the litany of humility or how the virtue of humility actually plays out in daily life, that can actually help us to unite things that seem contradictory, to have a more holistic understanding of the truth, right? So your love for dialectic and for discussion and argument, in many ways it's a desire to have a better holistic understanding of reality, right? Because that's how we operate as human beings, right? So I think that's my understanding of where this litany came from a Dominican friar's desire to make some finer distinctions in order to have a good grounding and holistic understanding and prayer about what it means to be humble. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I definitely remember from last time having a lot of being what? Reading this and talking about humility, a lot of it's very confusing. And you're like, should I do this or should I? A lot of confusion about how you should act and think.
Just ask Walter because he's the most humble out there.
Right. yeah, exactly. Right. I am the most humble, so you can bring me your humility questions.
There you go. Yeah. What do you know? And it's fine if you don't. But any specific teachings or specific things what did St. Thomas teach about humility, or how does it differ from what other saints or writings on humility?
Okay, I knew you were going to ask me this question.
Okay.
So last night at 10 p.m., I'm thinking about the next day. I was like, oh, they're going to ask me a question about what St. Thomas actually said. So I was scrolling through the Catholic Encyclopedia Online.
Wow.
Has the Summa Theologia. And you can go through different parts. I was okay, Google that real quick and let's see what he says.
Right.
The bottom line, I don't know a ton about what he actually says.
Sure.
And how it differs from other folks. So I don't have a whole lot. I'm gonna have to be humble here and
there you go.
And admit my ignorance. But I'm sure there are some great people. I work at a Dominican parish. I'm sure there's some great people here on campus we can find.
Right.
Right. Yeah. We'll try to put some resources in the description.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I haven't really read this through thoroughly yet, but are there any relations with the Dominicans, or is it just another litany of humility?
Good. That's a great question. I think again, if I knew more about what St. Thomas, the system. So this is the funny thing from my very limited understanding of St. Thomas. He has this whole systematic approach, and his systematic approach sometimes is just as helpful as what he actually says in any given article, because the way he approaches things is just as fantastic as the thing he says. So my hunch is that the way that St. Thomas thinks about and breaks down the virtue of humility, he says it's a subset of the virtue of temperance, which is interesting, right? So temperance being one of the cardinal virtues, and temperance one of the cardinal virtues? Prudence, justice, temperance, fortitude, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So it's one of the cardinal, it's like a subset of one of the cardinal virtues, right? Everything hinges, cardo is a hinge, right? Everything hinges on these virtues. So my hunch is that this is taking from the way that St. Thomas thinks about humility, and some of the subcategories of humility that he might address if you were to read through all of his section on the virtue of humility in the Summa Theologia, or other writings too, because there's other places he writes about this stuff.
All right, cool.
Anyways.
So,
perfect.
Okay.
Father, and the Son,
and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
O Jesus, meek and humble of heart,
Teach me.
From pride and all its effects.
Deliver me, Jesus.
From coveting greatness for its own sake or to excess.
Deliver me, Jesus.
From contempt of you and your law.
Deliver me, Jesus.
From a puffed up self-image.
Deliver me, Jesus.
From claiming to be a self-made man.
Deliver me, Jesus.
From ingratitude for your gifts.
Deliver me, Jesus.
From thinking that I have earned your gifts by my effort alone.
Deliver me, Jesus.
From boasting of having what I do not have.
Deliver me, Jesus.
From excusing my faults while judging others.
Deliver me, Jesus.
From wishing to be the sole possessor of the skills I have.
Deliver me, Jesus.
From setting myself before others.
Deliver me, Jesus.
From all vainglory.
Deliver me, Jesus.
From craving praise for its own sake.
Deliver me, Jesus.
From looking for flattery.
Deliver me, Jesus.
From withholding glory from you.
Deliver me, Jesus.
From showing off to the harm of my neighbor.
Deliver me, Jesus.
From presumption and false self-confidence.
Deliver me, Jesus.
From boastfulness.
Deliver me, Jesus.
From hypocrisy.
Deliver me, Jesus.
From the excessive need to be fashionable.
Deliver me, Jesus.
From obstinacy and contention.
Deliver me, Jesus.
From disobedience.
Deliver me, Jesus.
From all false humility.
Deliver me, Jesus.
From forfeiting my dignity as a child of God.
Deliver me, Jesus.
From bearing the talents that you gave me.
Deliver me, Jesus.
From an unreasonable fear of failure.
Deliver me, Jesus.
From avoiding my true vocation.
Deliver me, Jesus.
From despair at my weakness.
Deliver me, Jesus.
In the ways of humility.
Teach me, Jesus.
To know my limits and my strengths.
Teach me, Jesus.
To acknowledge the depravity of my past sins.
Teach me, Jesus.
To acclaim you as the author of all the good I do.
Teach me, Jesus.
To put my confidence in you.
Teach me, Jesus.
To be subject to you and your church.
Teach me, Jesus.
To be subject to others for your sake.
Teach me, Jesus.
To revere your presence in others.
Teach me, Jesus.
To rejoice in your gifts in others, even the gifts unseen.
Teach me, Jesus.
To do great things by your help and for your glory.
Strengthen me, Jesus.
To seek greatness in heavenly things and lasting virtue.
Strengthen me, Jesus.
To do my best, even when unnoticed.
Strengthen me, Jesus.
To put my share of your gifts at your service.
Strengthen me, Jesus.
To be neither puffed up by honor nor downcast by shame.
Strengthen me, Jesus.
To do penance for my sins and those of others.
Strengthen me, Jesus.
Above all, to strive to love you with all my being.
Strengthen me, Jesus.
And to love my neighbor as myself.
Strengthen me, Jesus.
In your name we pray.
Amen.
Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Awesome.
It's beautiful. It's longer.
Yeah. The line from disobedience. What does disobedience have to do with humility?
So a lot of this, again, has to do with like what... so one of the phrases that really stands out to me about just what it means to live well is right relationship, right? In some senses, the Christian life, human life, is all about right relationship. What's right relationship with God look like? What's right relationship with one another look like? What's right relationship with myself, with the natural world? All of these aspects of God's creation in which we have a place, we are made to live in right relationship with all of those different aspects of it. Part of that means that we live within a hierarchy. Authority, all authority is given by God, St. Paul. So in some way, God has put people in authority over us at any given point in time. And that means to be in right relationship with others means that when someone has legitimate authority over us, that we would obey, right? When they command something that, or they instruct something that is not objectively evil and is not like, there's all sorts of asterisks you can put on that. So in that sense.
So it's basically not saying like, I'm the leader, you're like humble, like, okay, yes, I obey you.
Yeah, so when you think about the word humble, like do you know what the origins of the word humble are? Like what does the word humble mean when you think about that?
Well, I'm trying to remember from my Latin book.
I was going to say, you pull all those Latin roots back out, right?
I can't think of anything.
Humus?
Humus.
Earth.
Oh, okay. I don't know that as the earth. Oh, so like down to earth, sort of.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, right. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are made from the dust of the earth. And so in some senses,
interesting.
To be humble is to be made low, to be close to the earth, right? To humble yourself is to be close to the earth, to be grounded in some senses, right? So when you think about being humble in relation to obedience, in some senses, it means accepting our lowliness in relation to others, whether that other is God or another person, or Niagara Falls or whatever else the thing is that we are lowly in comparison with, right? But it's interesting too. I love that the next section right after that is false humility. From false humility, deliver me, Jesus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is a way of like false debasement, because you can debase yourself and think you're lower than you actually are.
Right.
Whether it's because we forfeited our dignity as a child of God. People who've gone through like abusive or demeaning relationships can sometimes think of themselves as less as they are. Right? Mm-hmm. I'm not worth someone loving me. I'm not worth your time. I'm not worth. Okay, that's BS, because God says you're worth it, right? He thought you were worth like his son's life, right? Mm-hmm. That's a lot of worth you have. That's an example of like false humility. So like, well, being humble is like being low and being obedient to others. There's also like a sense in which there's a relationship to magnanimity, to greatness, to the dignity that we have as the only kind of being in creation, physical creation at least, that can claim to be in the image and likeness of God.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I feel like the first whole paragraph, or the first whole part it's saying like you don't own yourself or your gifts. So sort of explain that. Like I hear, especially from, interestingly enough, but especially for like pro-choice activists, and they'll say things like, it's my body. Like, do we own our body? Do we own our soul? Is that ours to have and ours to do what we want with? And also our gifts, like, do we own those? And what are we like?
Yeah, this is like one of the I would say, mysteries of being like a human being. The way that I have best understood and been taught is to think of us as secondary causes, secondary efficient causes. So you know what I think about like Aristotle's causes?
Like the uncaused cause and things like that?
That's an argument for the existence of God.
Right.
Aristotle has like, when you want to understand what a thing is, you should ask 4 questions about it.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Formal, efficient, final, and material. Material cause. So the efficient cause is like, what causes this thing to be the way it is, right? So when you write something with your pencil is actually an efficient cause. It makes the mark on the paper, but it's a secondary efficient cause because you're the one moving the pencil, right?
Right.
Now, in a way, that is like what we are as human persons, right? We are, in a manner of speaking, in an analogical way, which means like a relationship of likeness in the middle of a greater dissimilarity, right? Unlikeness, right? In an analogical way, we are like that pencil, in that all that we have has been given to us. You have been handed everything that you have, probably from the clothes on your back that were purchased by your parents to like the, even for me, like the money in my bank account was given to me by the good people of St. Gertrude who paid my salary.
Right.
Yeah.
Or it was given to me by like my brother who handed me his old jacket when he didn't need it anymore. Or all the stuff we have has been given to us. And yet we are a real, so it's all been given to us. We're a secondary cause, but we're a real cause of some kind. So we have real agency, we have real capability and real responsibility. We are responsible for our actions, but not as the prime source of those actions, right? So it's interesting to hear you talk about like the first section being about we do not own ourselves, or we are not the solely responsible for ourselves. I forget how you put it. When I was thinking about that, there do seem to be like, there's different sections when you see it laid out. I think that's on purpose. They're probably like different aspects of humility, right? Or pride, praying against pride and for humility. And this first one seems to be like place, right? What's our place? What's our place in relation to God? What's our place in relation to others? What's our place in relation to ourselves? Right.
Yeah. So when we were talking about like egotism and you're trying to make yourself kind of look good and stuff, I see a lot of people, but football players or just any kind of celebrity like actor or singer or something. They don't really like some celebrities are like, oh, and they're pretty humble, but a lot of celebrities we see, they're not super humble. They don't really have that virtue. But they bother too much with like their money and their looks and how expensive, what is the best way to practice humility in those types of, in one of those professions that you had a lot of attention, but you don't want to,
Yeah. This is where like a rule of life is probably really helpful, right? So like religious communities have a rule of life. These are the concrete practices and things that they do that help them to follow Jesus, right? Having a rule of life for yourself is a good thing to do. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's not going to be set in stone. But what's like an example? I have a problem with entertainment. Like I watch too much YouTube if I'm given the opportunity. So most it's like soccer highlights and like football highlights and like maybe the occasional like I go to some like Marvel rabbit holes once in a while. But like so I have set up with my wife some limits about my access to those things. I can't get them on my mobile devices. I can use it on our family computer, but only in like public places. And so she can keep me accountable and say like, hey, you've been watching soccer highlights for like 45 minutes now. Should you still be watching those at this point? Well, probably not. I should probably do the dishes, right? So a rule of life that helps you to know why are you here and what are the things you can do to get there, right? And that can include your clothing. I only have like $50 a month to spend on clothing, right? I'm only going to have 7 pairs of clothing for each season. I'm only going to have 1 pair of shoes for each different situation I'm going to find myself in. A pair of sneakers for running, a pair of like work boots for working, a pair of like shoes to wear to work. Right? That's what I need, right? So saying those things out loud and having accountability from another person, that can really help to limit excess in paying attention to like our looks or our clothing or something like that that's tempting to pride.
Right.
Something more though. Yeah, that can be a helpful tool. Again, part of this is going to come from like a place of insecurity too, because that's my hunch about pride. Pride usually finds behind it a sense that if I'm not, kind of like what you were talking about, Nick, if I don't do X, Y, and Z, I won't have X, Y, and Z that I really need, right? If I don't push myself forward, I won't have love. I won't have attention. I won't have friendship. That tends to be, when I think about ways to describe it, it sounds like grasping. Right, as opposed to receiving. This sounds like really foofy language when I say it, but the posture of our hearts is meant to be one of receiving rather than grasping. Right. So if we find in ourselves, like, for me, it feels like heartburn a little bit, but like when I find that like sense of heartburn or anxiety, like I have to grasp, I have to take for myself, whatever it is, publicity or attention or something. It's usually a bad sign.
Oh yeah, I mean. So this whole second paragraph really stood out to me a lot, and it really really sort of hit me because I struggle with pride and egotism a lot. And
as do most guys. I'm girls too, but like guys, I just know it as a guy. It's a guy thing.
I totally get that. And I just find myself I'm fearful that if I'm not egotistical and if I don't just say everything that comes to mind. Another thing is like thinking before I speak. I have this fear that if I think before I speak and I don't say stupid things that are funny usually, but if I don't say these stupid funny things and I'm not constantly pushing myself up and making it like, especially girls will find me boring and my friends will find me boring and I won't, and I know it's not good for me. Like I know a kid, he's probably about my age. I won't say his name, but he is just a really cool guy. And I've only talked to him a few times, but he's talked about like working on the farm with his grandfather, and he spends all of this time like breaking his back, working and like doing really hard labor. And he's like a Catholic homeschooler kid. He's very quiet, and he never talks about what he does. And when I talk to him, I'm like, wow, he is just so, like he just really seems like a man. Really seems like that. But I have this fear because if I'm like that, people won't like come and talk to me anymore.
Yeah.
I won't be interesting enough.
Yeah.
How should I deal with that? What's a good way to combat that and interiorly and exteriorly?
Yeah, definitely. Well, if it makes you feeling better, I mean, that's the same problem that like Adam and Eve had, right? Mm-hmm. Same problem that like every human being has, right? This is like the falsehood. One of the falsehoods probably that Satan sneaks in, he like twists. And he even does it to Jesus in the desert, right? We talked about this a little bit last time, I think, but like when Satan comes to Adam and Eve in the garden, and he like lies to them and he says, did he really say you couldn't eat from any of the trees? Right?
Yeah.
But we already know that's not what he said. He didn't say that at all. He said you can't eat from this one tree, right? But by saying like, did he really say you couldn't eat from any of the trees? It's like this implied thing like, do you know he's like really not going to take care of you? Do you know that he's really not going to like look out for you? Do you know that like if you don't like, take things for yourself, he's not going to be there for you, right? So this is like wound. There's this wound in us from that original sin, from that belief in that lie, that every human being, even Jesus himself, he was faced with that. Now he didn't fall into it, right? But he was faced with that same wound of when Satan came to him in the desert. He says, if you are the Son of God, right? If you really are, right?
Okay.
But Jesus knows, like, okay, but I am, so I don't have to do the silly things you want me to do. I don't have to like make stones into bread. I don't have to jump off this parapet. Like,
so did Jesus have any of that? Sometimes when people say that kind of stuff, it's like, like really going. I want to break out of this humbleness, like
I don't know,
and like I am, like because he was fully man too. So did he have any of those kind of feelings?
I don't know, and this is like one of the tricky parts when we talk about that. I heard Bishop Barron one time talk about like when you are talking about the interior experience of the God-man Jesus Christ, you got to like pump the brakes and go real slow. So I'm just going to say, like, I don't know. Because, like, he was fully human, so he experiences all the human emotions that we experience.
Right.
And yet, he's an unfallen human person. Mm-hmm. And he's fully God. So that means he's always in right relationship with his Father, right? And he's just spent 40 days in the wilderness with the Spirit, with his Father. Like, this is where he's coming from as he's hearing that kind of temptation from Satan. So, like, in some ways, the answer is probably no. But in some ways, it's probably yes.
Yeah. Like
he had to have really experienced this. There's a phrase from one of the church fathers where he says, Jesus has to be fully human because nothing is redeemed that he didn't go through.
Yeah.
Right? I'm butchering the quote, but like that's the gist of it. Like
right.
If he didn't go through it, then it's not redeemed. So he had to have really experienced the temptation. Mm-hmm. So in some sense, he probably did, but in some sense,
didn't lash out.
Yeah, but again, in all things, he's like us in all things but sin. So he did not sin.
Right.
So maybe he felt it.
Mm-hmm.
But
we'll know in heaven.
Yeah, I know. These are like great conversations. Like ask him in heaven. But yeah.
You'll
But
know. Yeah.
to like, but to come back to like next question about how do you respond to that kind of like insecurity? Honestly, I think it's by trying to allow the Father to love you, allow God to love you as you are, who you are. So practically, what does that look like? It looks like taking time for silence with Him in adoration or with a journal. It looks like praying things like this, finding those spiritual practices that are going to help you find the burrs. Like burrs are like when you're standing there, the rough spots, right? Find the burrs in your heart. This is one of those like great spiritual tools, spiritual gifts, this prayer, because it starts to like highlight those things to you. They're like jump at you a little bit.
Right.
And you're like, oh man, this one's like triggering me right now. This one's like making me think about these things. This one's making me think about that. Tools like this, silence with God, bringing those things to Him and just like asking Him about that. Those can be really practical ways to help. Also, surrounding yourself with good community. So like if you find humble men in your life, especially other guys, your peers, hang out with them, right? Yeah. Seek those people out, because there's a great phrase, you're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Right?
I just heard that somewhere.
Did you?
Oh, Father Mike said on his homily. I think.
Yeah.
Literally last Sunday.
I know. I've heard him say it. I've heard like Jordan Peterson say it. I've heard Bishop Barron say it a couple different times. It's got to be somebody said it at some point. Right? Yeah. But
I just came up with this idea. You are 5% of the first time.
Yeah, that's right. So those are some practical ways. How do you combat it? Good friends, good mentors too. So one of the big ways that like the Lord has helped me grow in confidence, I had a great mentor during college. He was just this guy who he was Christian. He wasn't Catholic, but like he just made time, and he set aside time intentionally in his schedule to talk with me about my relationship with God and to pray with me and to ask me what I was doing and what I was interested in.
So it says in here from the excessive need to be fashionable.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
You are we are our bodies are temples, and we should take care of them.
Yep.
Why, when I get dressed in the morning, should I shouldn't pick something that looks bad or just not care about what I wear. But what's the excessive need to be fashionable? Is that going and shopping all the time or something like that? Is that a specifically feminine thing that women have to deal with, or is it like men have to deal with it too? Or?
I don't know. I deal with it too. I have a shoe problem. I'm very picky about the shoes that I wear. I spend a long time. I have to buy new shoes. I spend a long time picking out the shoes that I wear, and like it's a thing. It's probably a holdover from my soccer days when like cleats were like the thing that like, oh, this guy's got like Nike Vapors, or like that guy's got whatever Adidas Predators. Okay. So your question is like, what's that look like to be not excessive?
Yeah. Like how do you let the Lord deliver you from the excessive need to be fashionable?
Yeah, right. Because there is, like you say, you are a temple of the Holy Spirit. It is not bad to dress well. There are a few different parts that come to mind. So this is just like me thinking about it in the moment. But one is prudence. So prudence, right thing, right way, right time.
Yeah.
If you are investing more time and effort and finances into clothing than is prudent, then it's really going to help you to do the things that you need to do. That's like one sign, right? That would be excessive. Another would be like oversensitivity about it.
Yeah.
Right. So again, I think one of the things that like helps me is like, what's the goal?
Yeah.
What's the goal of dressing? Right. Well, modesty, beauty, and like the work that you really are called to do. Right. So, when you are getting dressed in the morning, like I work from home some days. On those days, I just put on jeans and a t-shirt. And sometimes it's, let's say, Gertrude t-shirt to remind myself that I'm actually doing like ministry stuff that day and I'm just like hanging out, playing with the kids. But like, what is the thing for which you are dressing?
Yeah.
Right. To keep that in mind. That I find to be helpful. Yeah. I heard someone say like, if something's in your wardrobe and it doesn't give you joy, you shouldn't wear it.
Yeah.
There are some things I like about that. There are some things I don't like about that. Some things I don't like are like sometimes you just don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes it's just like the hand-me-downs you got, and like I'm not in a place to buy a whole lot more clothes. So like okay, But there is a gift to being able to present yourself in a way that helps others to recognize your dignity and their own dignity. But this is where like you can get like really deep in like the prudential discernment of like what to wear and not to wear.
Yeah.
You know?
What are some of the misconceptions of humility, and how can you argue like that's not humility?
So good. So help me out here. So what are some of the ones that you guys have heard?
I don't know. One of them I think is just not knowing what or intentionally not recognizing what your skills are. Yeah.
And almost like, how do you convince somebody like you the values of humility? Because some people it's like, well, you're putting yourself down. You're not like, I have these achievements or something.
Yeah, like having your college degree on the wall is that, and then being like, oh no, I don't do that. I don't want to show off or something like that.
Or like showing your trophies or just like anything like that, displaying things, which is good to display things, showing, but some people take it like
someone praises you. Oh no, I don't want to hear that.
Right.
That's gonna.
Yeah, and you can't accept any kind of praise. So, there are a couple thoughts. One is a quote from C.S. Lewis: "Humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less." Right. So when I do the things that I do, is the goal that I would increase in others' eyes, or is the goal the glory of God and the sharing in that glory with other people? So like, let's say that so in high school, my homeschool soccer team, we went to some national tournaments and like we won the tournament for like 3 years running. We were like national tournaments. Really fun, really good. And we had a really good team. Some of the best athletes I've ever played with were on that team, which was remarkable because we were like a tiny little homeschool group.
Yeah.
It was cool. But like they had these big honking trophies. And like we got to put them up in our homes, like trade them around and stuff. So like you have this big, massive, like 3-tier trophy for like this national tournament. A bad way to put that out would be to say like, look at me and all the good things that I'm doing. I'm better, implied, than you, right? I'm better because I've done all these things. But a good way to display it would be to display it and say like, oh my gosh, that was such a great tournament. I cannot tell you the ridiculous songs that we sung and the amount of things that we like did during that tournament. It was so much fun. We played so many hard games. These other teams were great teams. Those would be great things to talk about.
Right.
Then you're able to share that experience and that joy with others. It's not just about building yourself up. It's thinking about yourself less and more about like, wow, that was great to be part of something great.
Right.
Right. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. I sort of have this one of the lines, to be subject to others for your sake. Recently, I've been sort of having this like double false humility. It's sort of weird. I don't know. So recently, I'll hear like people who are, I don't know, and I'm this might just be something that like all teenagers struggle with, or maybe it's just unique to me. But I feel like I'm starting to get to a point where I'm growing up, and I'm like, oh, there are adults out there that aren't as smart as me or something. And usually first of all, I'm wrong. I don't think that and the reason why I say that is because there's someone who I respect and a lot, and they have a lot of like very knowledgeable. This is a very knowledgeable man. And just recently he's been saying some things that I've been like, I have a better developed opinion than you, or you might know the facts better, but I like have like your view is wrong or something, or is it something like that? And like I guess I'm like, oh, I'm growing up, and now I can see that some adults are not as smart as me. But every time I say that, I'm like, I just get disgusted with myself because I'm like, they're probably not, and like that guy that I was talking about, he's probably way more like, and I know that he's way more smart than me, but I've been having this creeping feeling in my mind, or like thought that always creeps in. Yeah. Oh, he's not as like I'm better or something like that.
Yeah, totally. And that's honestly, I think that's part of growing up. I continually realize that I work with priests on a daily basis who are amazing, holy men and human beings. Make mistakes. And Father John Paul will tell people this all the time. He's like, you can pray for me in my leadership and all the things, decision making and stuff, because he knows that what his strengths are and what his weaknesses are, right? And as we grow, we have a better sense of those things. So actually, you could be like, what I'm hearing in there is like, a partial good and a partial falsehood, right? The partial good is actually you may have some gifts in some areas that other people don't, right? You may have been given some gifts, like in terms of like formation or knowledge or the ability to, like you've been grounded in a prayer life, right? Those things are going to lead you more and more into wisdom as you grow in ways that just some people are not, right? Like in high school, I can point to, like, I worked at a grocery store for a couple summers, and some of the adults that I work with in a grocery store, terrible life decisions, just terrible life decisions they were making, right? Like not good things. They knew more about how to stock groceries than I did, right? But they were making bad moral decisions with their lives.
Yeah.
Right. So like there's a truth in there probably that like maybe you are actually better formed. Maybe you actually have something to contribute. Now the part that I hear you responding to in yourself is like, but that doesn't mean that I'm better than them. That doesn't mean that that comparison game is actually a helpful thing to play there. Right. And that's where like you're battling with yourself and saying like, but I know that like, so a helpful way that I've found to think of it is like, think of you and this other guy or whoever as participating in the truth together.
Yeah.
Right. If you think of yourself as playing the same game together, let's say what's like an analogy you can think about it. Think about the truth as like this big stream that like you're kind of like wading into deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
Right. He may have 1 foot in a good part of the current and 1 foot in like a stagnant backwater. Right.
Yeah.
And you may have both feet in a better part of the current, right? You can still acknowledge the good part that he has and say, well, you know, his participation in the truth there doesn't seem to be as full as maybe it could be, right? Maybe I need to learn from him in some other ways, but this one way, maybe like he's not participating at least to the best of my understanding, right? I had a boss in high school who was Muslim, and he ran a coffee shop. Good man. Actually taught me a lot about hard work and humility and working with others and conflict. I don't agree with him in his religious principles, right? His religious views. But he participates in the truth in some really good ways. And so like navigating that relationship with him helped me a lot in understanding how to think about that kind of relationship. Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
Yeah.
There's some kind of prayer or like examination of conscience, but like more at the end of the day, you know, examining like what you did, what were the bad things, but then you also highlight what are the good things that you did during the day. A lot of times we think of, you know, oh, I did this bad thing, and it's good to, you know, note that for your, you know, next confession or like to make yourself stronger next time. But a lot of times we focus on that. We don't focus as much as what we did good. Like what good, like I did that good thing. You don't really think about it. What are some tips? Like how can we notice that without then falling back into the sin of pride? Like I did that. Oh, no, now I did something bad.
Good. 2 things. Gratitude and similar to what I just said to Dick, I think seeing my part as a participation in the good rather than a cause of the good. So gratitude, all things that we have are gifts. You can recognize like the gift of being in the right place at the right time to do the right thing. You can recognize the gift of, oh, I was able to help that person in this situation. And really, if I think about it, that goes all the way back to like this person who taught me and this person who taught that person, right? So you can go through and be be grateful. You can't be gratitude, but you can be grateful. Yeah. That's like a huge help to humility, I think.
So can you not notice those things without noticing every person that was, you know, in the path? Because that's kind of...
Yeah, and that's where like your participation in the whole of it becomes helpful. So if I think about it like, oh man, it's so good that I did that. Who's the operating subject of that sentence? I.
Right.
What if I change that thought in my mind and re-narrate it as, man, that was so good that blank. What's the subject? The good.
Right.
The good is now the subject. Right. Yeah. My participation is a good part of that. But for any good to come about, all of the previous historical goods had to happen. Also, like the participation of another person in that good, that person had to be receptive to it. Right.
But it's still okay to think like, I made this happen too. Not just I, but I helped. Like, it's still good to think about.
Yeah, definitely. And to take like real ownership because you do have moral agency. You can choose to participate in the good.
Right.
and you can choose to participate in something that's less than good, right? But even then, like when you participate, to give praise to God and say like, well, praise God that like He gave me the gift to like do this,
Right.
that I was able to say yes, right? Because then you're still recognizing the primary causality is God. Secondary causality, I was able to say yes. Well, that's cool. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I know sometimes also, when you notice that you're wrong, it's kind of like you don't, like sometimes it's like, okay, I was wrong. Like that's pretty easy to do sometimes. But sometimes it's like you go argue, and then it's like I've dug myself this far down. How can I get back up without like looking like a fool? And like, sometimes you just got to be the humble person or being the sibling. Yeah. And just see like, okay, I was wrong. But sometimes it's really hard to admit that you're wrong. Yeah. Especially if the person's younger than you. Kind of.
I do this with my children all the time. I'm like, no. And they show me. I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah. So what are some tips that you can, make that easier? Do you know any?
Don't be wrong. That's my first tip.
There you go. Yeah. I will say my dad is someone who's really good at that because
what does he do?
Well, recently I don't know. He just does it. Like I'll be like he'll say something and I'll be like, actually, Dad, look this up, and he'll be like, oh yeah, I was wrong, and I was like, oh, I can't do that. I am so bad at that.
Yeah, I know it. Honestly, that's probably like the way to think about it though. Like just do it. Like the Nike slogan, just like. It's got to do it sometimes. It's not going to taste good in the moment.
So it sucks. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's really
pie, it doesn't taste good.
Especially, I was in a history class the other day and we got in this argument and I said it was sort of like two viewpoints, and then my history teacher has this thing that he says, and I think you probably got it from somewhere, but he says, embrace the healing power of and it basically means that it's like, so, and usually in history class, I'll present my opinion and I won't budge from it.
Yeah.
And usually I actually do think I'm right. I don't just say it because but usually I'll be like, no, it's not and. But this recent case, I said something and I said, this is where it comes from. And it doesn't come from this. And then another person said, it actually does. And I was like, you have a really good point. And I still think my point is valid, but I think we're both right. Shoot. Yeah. And it really didn't feel good, but I just.
Yeah. I think another part of it is like taking yourself, being able to laugh at yourself, not taking yourself too seriously, right? There's like a lightheartedness. I feel like it's a quote. I forget who it's from. Probably from C.S. Lewis.
So many quotes. I have like 0 quotes in my mind. Yeah. I know things, but. Like, you have a quote for everything. It's great.
Yeah, I think it's because I've given a lot of talks, and like you always need to have like some references.
Right, yeah.
It's like covered in those talks. So,
well, C.S. Lewis says.
Yeah, exactly. He's a good one to reference.
Yeah, right.
Usually, like with wise people, there's always a childish playfulness about them, and with children, there's always a great wisdom about them. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. I had that in mind. That really struck me when I read it, because I think sometimes my temptation is like. I'm Mr. Director of Evangelization or Children and Youth Evangelization. I have a MA in Theology and 10 years of experience doing youth ministry. And like, right? Mm-hmm. I'm wrong about so many things. Yeah. I'm wrong about so many things in the field that I claim to be an expert or experienced in, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So having like a lightheartedness and saying like, shoot, well, put my foot in that one.
Try to talk about the Trinity for more than 5 minutes, and you will accidentally say something heretical.
Try to talk about humility for more than 5 minutes, and you'll find something you need to ask for forgiveness.
Yeah, I'm an expert on humility.
I'm an expert on trying to be humble. I don't know what that is.
I wonder if is there any really good books out there about humility?
Oh, probably. Yeah.
Walter should know them.
I should know them, being the humility expert here.
Right. Well, I think it'd just be funny if you wrote a book on humility, because
I would buy it. It would be on my
bookshelf.
You
wrote the book on humility?
Yeah.
Well, Thomas Aquinas is hard to read, so I don't know if I'd recommend that one.
Yeah.
There's a couple of great litanies on humility out there.
Yeah, that's true. You've done them both. So.
Yeah. I've prayed them both. I am now humble. I think, honestly, if I were to write a litany, I would want to write it on a litany on love and hatred. Like a litany of love, I think would be an amazing thing, because behind all this stuff, like, this is my thing. So you guys know anything about like there's like Pauline, Petrine, and like Johannine, John.
Yeah.
Different like ways of approaching following Jesus.
No, okay.
There's more than that too. There's like Marian. There's all sorts of things.
Yeah.
way background thing. This is one of the things that I love about following Jesus. It's personal all the way down, right? We're always influenced by other persons. There's no abstract, in principle way to follow Jesus. It's always through other people and other relationships. And that's amazing. Mm-hmm. That's just so cool. Anyways, I tend to probably be more Johannine than Pauline or Petrine. Meaning like when you read the letters of St. John, what are some of the things that he like does? He leans into like the mystery and he leans into love.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
God is love. That comes from the first letter of John.
Exactly. Those who do not know love do not know God, because God is love. It's like on the inside of our wedding rings. My wife and I's wedding rings. 1 John 4:19. Those who do not know love, or in this is love, not that we have loved God, but that He first loved us. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Behind like humility, behind basically every virtue is just knowing who you are, and living that out, which is that you are a beloved son or daughter of the Father.
Yeah,
it's a very simple thing.
To go back to the, digging yourself back into the hole, or a lot of times like dealing with criticism and stuff makes you want to lash out. Like we were talking about, like the agony of the garden. I was asking, what role does humility play in the criticism?
Yeah, good question. I think humility can help you to not take criticism personally, even if it's about stuff that you have personal responsibility for, right? Mm-hmm. Every nugget of criticism probably has like a grain in it that's worth paying attention to, right? Even if most of the criticism is unfounded, my experience is at least that there's something that this person's seeing. What is it that he or she is seeing? Right? It might be wrapped up with a bunch of other BS, but like there's something that this person is seeing. Yeah. What is that thing? Having humility allows me to kind of like
not necessarily that they're right, but like what are they seeing?
Yeah, or like that they are at least 1% right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right? That there's a nugget in there that I do need to pay attention to.
Because something made them think that.
Yeah. And because they are given an intellect and they have a fundamental orientation to the good, there's something that sparked it. Right. So there's always 1% you pay attention to. When I think of like humility, you ever see like The Matrix?
Yeah, I've seen The Matrix.
The bullet scene.
Oh yeah.
Where like Neo, the main character, he slows down time so that bullets are flying past him, but he can like dodge them. Right? He can like move around the bullets. That's kind of how I think about how humility relates to criticism. Yeah. Criticism can feel like it's a bullet that's shot straight at you sometimes, right? Humility lets us slow down, step aside, and say, look where that's going. That's interesting. It's heading right towards this spot right here. And then it's objectifying it. It's moving it outside of yourself and turning it into an issue that you can then respond to, and not just like an ad hominem, like butting of heads, personal criticisms.
Yeah, that's good. Just to wrap up here, I had another thing I've been struggling with recently is thinking that I deserve things that I most definitely do not. Whether it be, I guess the main example is just like I'm jealous about, like, let's say a girl that I'm crushing on is hanging out with another guy, or something like that, and I get jealous and I think, why isn't she hanging out with me or something like that, and I guess I think that I deserve her company or something like that. I don't know. I haven't thought it out completely, but how do you? It's hard because you want to say these are all good things, but you also don't want to say, like, you also want to throw them all away and say, like, I should just be happy with what I have and I shouldn't go seek anything else. I don't know.
Yeah, good. That's a hard one. I struggle with the same thing. Again, I think this is where the posture of heart to receive rather than to grasp. If you, so I know I read a book one time where this guy who's a Christian lawyer talks about his way of helping the defendants, the people he's defending, be not defensive in court. Yeah. He physically tells them, like, under the table, as you're sitting there, you have to open your hands on your knees. Put your hands on your knees and open them. Because physically, when you're standing here, sitting there with your hands open, it's actually hard to be defensive. Because you feel like your body is getting you ready to receive something. You're just like open.
Yeah.
Right? So when I find myself in the situations, that's kind of like the visual thing that I do in my heart. I see myself, okay, I feel like I'm trying to reach out and take this thing. I'm trying to reach out and take, like Adam and Eve took the apple, right? I'm trying to reach out and grab this thing that is not mine yet. Now, it could be mine, and I have hope that it could be mine one day, right? That I would possess the good that I see in this thing. That's a good thing. Hope is good. You see some real good. You want it. That's a really good thing. And I trust that to go about it the right way is as important as having the right thing, right? One of the truths of the spiritual life is that the journey is in many ways the same as the destination, and how you get there is where you're going to end up, right? So to live a life of respect, of love, of charity, of humility, a life that receives, that's what the kingdom of heaven is meant to look like, right?
Yeah.
To try to achieve the kingdom of heaven, and this happens all the time in like church world, it happens all the time in like human world. We think we know some great good, and to get there, we're willing to violate some goods that are more fundamental than this thing we're trying to achieve, right?
Yeah.
To get the house clean, I yell at my kids. To get my kids to brush their teeth. This is like one of my pet peeves, guys. I am so impatient. I hate brushing teeth with my children because I don't hate it. I love my children. It's really challenging for me because they don't focus very well. I'm like, guys, we spent 10 minutes here. You could have brushed your teeth in like 2 minutes and we could be done and we could be reading stories right now. But that's my favorite thing to do at night. We could just be sitting there reading stories. I love doing that with you guys. But instead, here we are reminding you again to brush your teeth. Just brush your teeth, right? Well, I find that really hard to do. And in doing that and trying to get to the good of reading stories together, family quality time, prayer time together, I skip the step of how you have to get there in the right way.
Yeah.
Right. So those are like a couple of things that have helped me when I find myself like being jealous or wanting something that I don't have yet, right? Thinking that I deserve something. In my heart, how can I just move the hands of my heart to openness, to receive, right? How can I trust the Lord that he will give me that good thing in time? What kind of litanies do I need to run through in my mind to remind myself of that, right? And maybe what kind of good action do I need to take to like continue to pursue it? Maybe if it's like a relationship, maybe I need to like go pursue that girl a little more and say like, hey, like you should hang out sometime. Like my friends are all coming over Friday night. You should come hang out with us, right? I really like that. Or like, even like in those kind of relationships, it depends on where your family is with like dating and how you guys pursue that kind of stuff. But like being honest with that person, just like naming something to them and saying like, you know, I really like you. And I'd like to like spend some time getting to know you some more in a really intentional way. That could be a really good way to navigate those kind of things. That kind of like openness and attitude of reception. Yeah, that could be helpful.
Okay, so last time you asked us the question. You asked what was a person in our life that was, you know, stuck out as humble to us, and what about that?
Yeah.
Other than yourself, what is somebody that you think is humble?
Yeah,
yourself is a big one, and I know that it'll probably be difficult to be like, who other than Walter?
I know, right? I'm so
Past
humble. It's,
Walter, who is humble in your life?
Yes. So trying to reduce my puffed up self-image. Yeah, good. So I'll answer that, and then I have a question for you guys too.
Okay.
So who is someone who I think of as like really humble? My buddy Matt. My buddy Matt is very humble. Matt is an incredibly gifted leader, but an incredibly gifted teacher and counselor. And he's a good businessman. He's had like 50 different positions in leadership, both like in churches and in businesses. And like he's like run restaurants and done all this amazing stuff. And what he is most at the core of his being, and he really just lives this way, is that he is the beloved son of the Father. And he actually lives that out, whether it means that he and his family have this epic townhouse that they're in or one room in an apartment. that they're living out of because they're sharing it with someone else because they don't have the income because to do the other things that they need to do, he had to step back from his position, right, of income, whatever it was. He is just so committed to living that out that it makes him really honest, not falsely humble. He always jokes about like how good looking he is and like how good looking all his friends are. And like, he actually believes it. He believes he's a handsome man. He believes his friends are all like these beautiful people. And like, that's kind of cool. Yeah. It's kind of beautiful to be like affirmed by your friends. They're like, you're such a handsome dude, right? That's like nice, right? But it's not like, it's not falsely, it's not proud. It's not false in some way. It's coming from a place of truth and a place of humility.
Yeah.
So that's what I think of.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Question for you guys then. Yep. As you've done 2 podcasts now on humility, you've prayed about humility. We've talked about humility. What are some of the finer distinctions of humility that have stood out to you? Something that you've learned about it?
Well, I've already made 2 notes on my paper so far. Things that you've said that have really stood out to me. But I don't know. Overall is difficult. I mean, I always struggle with it. I think it's probably the main cross I'm trying to bear in my life right now. Especially trying to learn to think before I speak and to really take time with my words and not say something. Because again, I just really think that if I don't say the first thing that comes to mind and I'm not spontaneous, I'm going to be boring. But I think that with that, I guess one of the things I've learned recently is like people who love and respect you, if they don't love and respect you for who you are, and it's really because of like what you say or because you're spontaneous, then their love and respect is not necessarily something worth having. And that's been really good because I'm like, oh, like I don't need this. I don't need this person's affirmations. Like I need to be who I am and the man who God wants me to be. And God will put the right people in my life. And God will take away people that aren't good for me, something like that. But yeah, just in this interview we're just having, I think one of the things, if I don't take it, it won't be given. That was something that I'm like, that is what I think all the time.
Same.
I totally think if I don't reach out and grab something and take it for myself, that I'm not going to get it.
Yeah.
That's difficult, especially because, I don't know. It's difficult to balance that with also being like, oh, men should be the pursuers and they should be someone who like goes and gets what they want and
and taking responsibility for your actions. Yeah, it is difficult to balance.
But that, and then also just being, and also thinking about 2 people, if one's right and one's wrong about something, it's not necessarily the right person is better. It's that you're both participating in the truth in different ways. So that is something that, those are a few things that I'm like, sort of blowing my mind a little bit.
Good. Yeah. That's helpful.
Yeah. I feel like I've met, several people in my life. And
at least 2.
At least 3. Yeah. But yeah, everybody has a different personality. Sometimes it's hard to deal with somebody's personality sometimes, but just to know that, and it's not my personality. Everybody has to be like me, but to deal with like other people, not everybody, all their personalities have to be just like me.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to do. It's a process of like growing and maturing and seeing people as the Father sees them, right? For all their gifts and the warts and all the stuff in between, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's good. That's great. Well, thank you guys again. It's wonderful to be with you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Walter. You've given me a lot to think about, and I'm grateful for that. So.
Yeah, I'm grateful for you guys. Grateful for you asking questions, for like having this project, for your pursuit of the truth, of understanding, and of God.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just one thing for our listeners, if you have any questions, comments, or especially if you have anybody you'd like us to interview, you can email us at uncoveringthelitanies@gmail.com. And we also have a website, right? Do you know the URL for that, Luke?
Yes, I think it's Uncover the Litanies, not Uncovering, because our website couldn't fit that in it, but uncoverthelitanies.wixsite.com. thomistic.com/podcasts, and I'll put it in the description, so you can all visit that.
Yeah, they're on it.
Cool.
Way to go.
Yeah.
Nice.
Thank you so much, Walter.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.